Time to start. How you guys doing? Hey, don't worry. I'm not joining the band, okay? I'm not. I just want to do a welcome and say, hey, we want to celebrate something. Last night we hosted Castile's homecoming of dance. Yeah, it was awesome. And before we celebrate, the building's obviously still here. That was good. But one thing I wanted to warn you about so you don't get distracted is, no, we're not going to play Pong. The production company, one of their lasers, actually shot into our projector and fried out one of the chips. I don't think you could have done that if you tried. Now, they said they'll cover the cost. We just couldn't fix it yet. So it's going to be there. Don't be bothered by it. Just try to, think of that. That line shows the line of the love that we showed our community by hosting this thing last night. And that was the only thing that kind of went wrong, went crazy. Plus, I'm not mad because if you would have asked me as a pastor, what's something you will never say as a pastor to the congregation? I would never say their lasers damaged our computer chip. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but here I am saying it. But what I want to do is I want to celebrate this moment because it was pretty awesome. And I even have a little video clip here of some of it last night of what was going on in there. And the guy in the hat is our drummer. That's actually not a fire extinguisher they're spraying. That's a deodorant spray. Because it definitely smelled like teenage sweat and fear last night. The other crazy thing is, see how full the room is? Only about half of the crowd was ever in here at once. There was just as many outside doing the games and the stuff we set up. And the coolest thing about this, the comments we got was from parents. Yeah, isn't that awesome? Parents were impressed when they dropped the kids off. A lot of the students, compared to last year where they had to stand in line for an hour to get into the thing, said this was so well run. They got to walk right in. They experienced a great night. The principal even said, there's no way we could have pulled off something this great and this good if it wasn't for the generosity and the skill set of Rock Point Church. So he thanked us. So thank you. It's your generosity. You're the church. So as we go to worship, I expect you to worship like they were dancing around. So are you guys ready? Don't loosen up. Don't pull a hammy. Let's worship. All
right, church. If anybody has a reason to celebrate, it is the people of God. So we're going to worship Him with all we've got today. We're going to lift Him up. So let's put our hands together. And let's fill this place with the praise of our God. Come on. We're singing over fear, and we're dancing over doubt. This is how we overcome, by the blood and by the sound of our testimony, of our endless faith. This is how we overcome, by the sound of Jesus' name. There is wonder-working power in the blood that breaks all chains, and the prison doors are shaking when we call upon the name. There's wonder-working power is found. Freedom is found in the blood of the Lamb. And freedom is found in the scars of your hands. Freedom is found at the sound of your name. The sound of your name. Freedom is found in the blood of the Lamb. And freedom is found in the scars of your hands. Freedom is found at the sound of your name. The sound of your name. The sound of your name. There is wonder-working power in the blood that breaks all chains, and the prison doors are shaking when we call upon the name. There is wonder-working power in the blood that breaks all chains, and the prison doors are shaking when we call upon the name. There's wonder-working power. There's wonder-working power. There's wonder-working power. There's wonder-working power. Amen. We rejoice that our God is working in might and power in this moment. And we can trust in Him and we can lean on Him as we sing this out. I'm leaning on the everlasting arms that placed me on the rock that stands. And I hold true to the one who breaks my fall and lifts me time and time again. Oh my God, so good. You never give up. You never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. Oh my God, so good. You never give up. You never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. This freedom purchased by the highest price. This grace outweighs all my shame. I'm made new, but I'm made new through the power of sacrifice. And from death now raised to life again. Oh my God, so good. You never give up. You never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. Oh my God, so good. You never give up. You never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. God poured out His love upon us. On the cross, He shed His blood to set us free, so we can sing this out. I'm not a slave to sin, so I'm singing. You are good and buried with Christ to rise in your freedom. 'Cause you are good. When you make a promise, Jesus, you keep it. 'Cause you are good. So I praise your name as long as I'm breathing. 'Cause you are good. Come on. I'm not a slave to sin, so I'm singing. 'Cause you are good and buried with Christ to rise in your freedom. 'Cause you are good. When you make a promise, Jesus, you keep it. 'Cause you are good. So I praise your name as long as I'm breathing. 'Cause you are good. because of your love for me. Oh my God, so good. You never give up, you never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. Oh my God, so good. You never give up, you never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. Oh my God, so good. You never give up, you never give up on me. Oh, what joy I found because of your love, because of your love for me. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, and when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, and when brokenness and pain is all I know, oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Shame no longer has a place to hide, and I am not a captive to lies. And I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. Oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. There's power that can break off every chain, and there's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. And there's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. And my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, I'm standing in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. pray with me, church? God, we praise you and we thank you that your perfect love casts out all fear. God, that you are greater, you are stronger, you are more. And God, we can find rest and refuge and help and strength and joy and hope in Jesus today. And God, we praise you and thank you for that. God, we thank you that you've brought us here together to come before our God, Lord, to cast our cares upon you, Lord. And I pray that you would help us to get our eyes off of the distractions, the fears, the anxieties, God, and that we would fix our eyes on Jesus. For you are our hope. You are our strength. You are our joy and our peace. Help us, Lord, to know your love today, to rest in your love. And God, I pray that, Lord, as we do that, Lord, you would be magnified, glorified, and exalted in our lives. So have your way in this place. We give you all that we are, and we love you, Lord. It's in Jesus' name we pray all of these things. And all of God's people said, amen. You can have a seat.
Hey everyone, my name is Randy, and welcome to Rock Point. If you're our guest today, connect with us in the courtyard at New Here Start Here. We would love to say hi and give you a free gift. While you're here with us today, we encourage you to take out your smartphone and type in rockpoint.io. Here you can follow along with the sermon, take notes, keep track of upcoming events, sign up for We Are Rock Point class, and more.
We have groups all over the East Valley because people like you have been willing to let God use you and your home to create community. As we continue to grow, we want to make sure everyone at Rock Point has a chance to be known, accepted, supported, and developed. If you have a willing heart and a few open seats in your home, then we'd love for you to consider leading a group. If you're interested in learning more, join us for one of our group leader trainings right here on campus. Visit rockpoint.io and click on the What's Happening tab to learn more and sign up.
Whether you're new to Rock Point or you've been attending for years, we would love for you to join us for the We Are Rock Point class at 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, September 14th to dig into what makes Rock Point unique. Learn about our history, mission, and where we are headed as a church. This is also your opportunity to get further connected. So head over to rockpoint.io and tap on the We Are Rock Point tab to learn more and sign up. We hope to see you there.
We're going to Greece, and we want you to join us. In September of 2020, Rock Point will be following in the footsteps of Paul while traveling through Athens, Corinth, and Philippi, visiting many of the major locations from Paul's journey throughout the New Testament. If you'd like to find out more about how you can be a part of this trip, join us on Sunday, September 22nd at 2 p.m. for our Tour of Greece informational meeting. Visit rockpoint.io and click on the What's Happening tab to learn more about the trip and to register.
Our mission here at Rock Point is to point people to Jesus by loving them like Jesus. Thank you for being a part of this by living intentionally and through the faithful giving of your tithes and offering. While we don't receive the offering in service, we do have boxes near all the exits, both in the worship center and the lobby. You can also give online at rockpoint.io. Let us know if we can help you in any way while you're here with us today, and be sure to connect with us on rockpoint.io and on social media to stay up to date with everything here at Rock Point.
Alrighty, well, hello again. And hey, it's awesome. Hey, we're still continuing this series about anxiety and finding peace even when you don't have quiet in your life. And today I was reminded of something that happened to me a few years ago. I was lifting weights in my garage. I was bench pressing, and I violated one of the golden rules of lifting by yourself. Don't try to lift more than you can handle. And as I was bench pressing, I was going back, got the first few times, and then I'm coming up, and then you get to the point where it's like I'm laying on the bench, it's like, all right, it's not moving forward anymore, and I'm trying to will it to move forward, and it did start moving again, down. And next thing you know, it's stuck on my chest. And there's nobody can hear me. There's no one in the house. And so I'm like, this is bad. It's crushing me. And as I'm sitting there, there's two things you can do in these scenarios. The easiest one and the quickest one is to just tilt and let the weight slide off one end, but then you better let go because then the bar goes kind of flying. The problem was I had a car on one side and a TV on the other. I hadn't thought it through. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. So I have to go with plan two, which is the much more complicated and harder one, which is you roll the bar down your body until you get it to like your hip pivot point and you can sit up. So now I know what cookie dough feels like. And so I rolled this thing down my body, got it to the hip point, sat up, and it was so heavy that it was actually not just cutting off blood flow, it was pinching nerves. I could feel tingling in my feet. So I got to get this thing off me fast. But the bench that I was on was a little bit lower than normal, so my feet were a little higher. So I was in a really bad position. I could not get off the bench. I was like, I couldn't do it. So I sat there and I said, there's only one thing I can do. It's a dangerous maneuver for a man, but it was like put my feet back under behind me and in one quick move, throw it with all my hips and then try to slide back out of the way as it landed down. And so I did a moment of quiet meditation and then prayer. And then I did that maneuver. I go, and I move back, bam, the weight goes, crashes down onto the bench. And I'm like, oh, I did it. So I stood up in victory. But what I didn't realize is the bar had pinched my shorts and my underwear under it on the bench. So as I stood up in victory, my pants went down in honor of the moment. And I tell you, I'm standing there facing this way. My garage door's behind me and it was open. So there I am, mooning the world. And I knew, this is back when only like 5 houses were lived in on my street. But I knew Bush's Law. It's like, I know the day I'm having right now, there's someone back there. I just know it with all of my heart and soul. It's getting worse. And as I turned, yep, there it was. Our neighbor walking by, pushing her kid in a stroller. Right on the sidewalk, and literally just right there, like covering their kid's eyes. This neighbor never talked to me. They would drive by and she'd just look at me, covering her kid's eyes in the car. That has nothing to do with the sermon. I just thought about it and it was kind of funny. No, that's what I want to talk about today. It's like when we have those moments in life that life is more than we can press right now. Life is more than we can handle right now. It seems like it's too heavy. I can't do it. I'm taking on more than I can handle. And what do I do in this moment? How do I handle this moment? And even the way we try to get out of the moment sometimes causes more anxiety and more embarrassment and more issues. And what do we do in those moments when life is too much for us to lift? And one of the things that we want to look at today is there is a lie I believe many of us believe, especially in the church world. We have this lie we believe, and I think it's the lie that can cause even more anxiety than even life being hard. And it's this lie. God won't give me more than I can handle. Have you guys ever heard that? It's been said all the time. Matter of fact, you might have said it to yourself this morning or to someone you know. It's like when a lot of times it's our go-to and someone's like, I can't handle life. Oh, don't worry, God won't give you more than you can handle. That's not true. That's not anywhere in the Bible. Matter of fact, this passage we're going to look at today is just one of many examples of God most frequently does exactly the opposite of that on purpose. God will load up the bar and say, hey, bench press this in life, and you can't do it. And he's doing it on purpose. So if I believe that God don't give me more than I can handle, when he actually does, that's going to create a lot of stress and anxiety in your life. Because you're going to have some fears. You're going to start wondering, does God love me? Does God even give a rip? Or is there something wrong with me? Either there's something wrong with God's love for me, or I guess I'm wimpy and I should be able to handle this when I can't. Make sense? So what we want to talk about today is what I believe is the truth that might help us with some of our anxiety and unpackage this truth and some of the fears that come along with it. And it's simply this. The big idea today is this. God won't give me more than he can handle. God will never give you more than he can handle. He gives us more than we can handle all the time. Half the things that when it says, hey, this is what it means to follow me. When Jesus calls us to this mission, as we say right here, to point people to Jesus by loving them like Jesus, it means we're going to have to give, we're going to have to serve, we're going to have to sacrifice, and we're not going to feel able. We're going to feel like, I don't have enough time, I don't have the resource, I don't have the ability, I can't really do this, of course you can't. And God didn't say this is the time to check out, this is the time to trust him. That's the whole point. So we're going to be in a story in the book of Judges. It's in the Old Testament, not too far in. And we're going to be in Judges chapter 6 and 7. And let me just kind of set up the background here if you're not familiar with the book of Judges. The book of Judges is about a time in Israel's history. They didn't have a king, but it says it was a wild time. It said that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And in other words, they all had their own truth. Nobody's like that anymore, right? And it caused problems. So what would happen is God would allow them to be in over their heads. Life would be more than they can handle. And then that would cause them to turn back to God and trust him. And then he would raise up a leader, a savior to save them. Those are foreshadowing of Jesus ultimately coming. And they were called a judge. And he would raise up this one leader and they would get him out of the scenario. And that's what's happening again. And then they go back and, second verse, same as the first, a little bit longer, a little bit worse. But in this particular one in Judges chapter 6 and 7, we hear about the story of a man named Gideon, who ends up being one of the judges. How many of you heard the story of Gideon before? A lot of you. I'm just going to close in prayer and end early. Oh, yeah. Cardinal pregame, here we go. No. So Gideon is one of these judges. That's the story we're going to look at. And what's happening in this particular moment is it says that most of the people of Israel, they still believe in God, but they're worshiping these other idols as well, which we'd think, God, that's kind of weird. Well, we do it all the time. An idol, in their time, literally they built these altars to these false gods. And we probably don't do that. Well, some of you might in your house, I don't know. But we do build idols. Idols is anything that takes our attention off God. Anything we think we need more than God. Matter of fact, I'll worship God, but what I really want is this. And if there's something that you like, hey, I love God, but if I ever took this away, I can't love God anymore. Like, it'd be really hard. You think God hates you. And it's anything that we put our focus above on God. So we might not worship a false God, but we might drive one. We might live in one. We might have birthed one, we might have married one. I don't know, but we have these things that our material success and these things that we say, I love God, but I want this. That's an idol. So we can do the same thing. So in this moment, what they're struggling through is that God's allowed the Midianites, these hordes, the Midianite hordes, to this other country to invade and steal their food all the time. They come in and take stuff and take their food. And that's what's happening. So they're struggling. And that's where we pick up the story of Gideon. And we're going to start in chapter 6, verse 11. It says, then the angel of the Lord, which I've said over and over, it's God, it's most likely Jesus, God the Son, pre-incarnate coming. It says, the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, not Oprah, Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. So he's hiding. A wine press is a terrible place to thresh wheat. You got to throw it up. You want the wind to blow through it. But he's doing it in a terrible spot because he's trying to hide. He's afraid. He doesn't want the Midianites to come steal their food. And so in this context where he's hiding out trying to thresh this wheat, says verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Can you imagine how that must have sounded to Gideon? He's hiding out, all afraid. And Jesus shows up and says, hey, mighty hero, the Lord's with you. And what we're going to see here in this interaction and the rest of the story is Gideon has to confront 4 fears. 4 fears when it comes to this idea that God is with you and he's called you to something mighty. He's called us to something. God sees, he has a mission for us. He has works planned out for us. He has something in our life that he wants us to be mighty in, but we have these fears because it looks like we're in over our head, which we are. And we have to understand what God is really doing. So the first thing Gideon responds is typically what happens to us when life seems to be too heavy of a bench press for us. And what happens when we get fearful is it says this. He says, the mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Verse 13, Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. You see what it is his first question is the same thing you and I do. It's like you come to a sermon, you hear, hey, you need to trust God. But life is so hard. This is difficult. I can't handle it. And then the Lord says, I am with you. And we're like, really? And then you remember all the Bible stories or the sermon. You're like, that might be good for them. But I'm not seeing that happen to me. He's just like you and me. Basically, his first fear is, does God really love me? Think about it. Especially if you are a Christian, you come to church, and life gets hard, harder than you can handle. our first fear is, does God hate me? Does God love me? Does he really give a rip about me? And even if you're new to church, you might not say, does God love me? You say it in the other version. Oh, you want to tell me there's a God that loves me? If God is so loving, then why does he allow, and you fill in the blank? That's our first struggle. Our first struggle. And that's the first question that Gideon brings up is like, hey, do you really love me, God? Really? If you did, where you say you're here, but it doesn't feel like you're here. And he says, then the Lord turned to him and said, no, I'm here. Okay, how can I prove it? Give me a hug. No, that's not what he does. It says, then the Lord turned to him and said, go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I'm sending you. Isn't that funny? He just says, where were you if what's all this does? And God's just like, are you done? Okay, here's what I need you to go do now. I do love you, and I'm going to rescue all of you. Even though you have been worshiping false idols, I still love you enough. I'm going to rescue you, and here's how I'm going to do it. You're going to go do it. And here's how you're going to do it. You're going to take the strength you have. How much strength did Gideon have in this moment? He's hiding out, threshing wheat, and when God says he's a mighty hero and he's with him, he's like, really? Doesn't really feel like you're with me. And in that moment, in his lowest, weakest moment, God told him to get on mission with him. What happens when I say, hey, God is doing amazing things here in this community. And if this is your church, I need you to serve. I need you to give. I need you to share your faith. And we need us to do what God called us to do, to be disciples of Jesus, to be the church. And then we're like, what I just told you. I feel like life has overwhelmed me. I feel too tired. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have the wherewithal. I'm freaking out here. I'm afraid of life. And you know what God says? Do what I tell you to do. Trust me. Trust me. And so it's kind of a weird moment. He challenges him. He says, hey, here's what you're going to do. But then that brings up the second question the second fear we have in verse 15 when Gideon says, but Lord, Gideon replied, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. So he's saying, of all the 12 tribes, Manasseh is kind of a weaker one. My tribe within my clan, my tribe within Manasseh is the weakest, and my particular family is the weakest in that. And basically, I'm the weakest of them. In other words, he's saying, you called me a mighty hero that's going to rescue everyone? My own mother wouldn't even think I could be the hero, is what he's saying. He's like, my mom would say, Gideon? No. Gideon's like Woody Allen. I got a question. You know, it's like, what are you going to do? If you're young, you have no idea what I just said. I'm speaking in tongues to you. You need an interpreter. Ask someone over 50. He says, he goes, how can I do it? I'm a weak. You know what he's saying? His second fear. All right, maybe you do love me. Maybe you do want to rescue us. But does God know what he's doing? That's our second fear. Maybe he loves us, but is he really omniscient? Is he really all powerful? Does he really know what's going on? Because what you just said, even if you do love me, sounds stupid. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds impossible. My strength, I can barely get through today, and my strength, I'm going to go rescue all of Israel from the Midianite hordes. That sounds dumb. And maybe when you hear stuff like God speaking through the word, through a message, and you're like, I don't have what it takes to do what he's asked me to do. Exactly. We don't. We don't. Because here's what God says. The Lord said to him, I will be with you. That's why he only needs to take the strength he has. Because it's going to take a lot more than the strength he has. It doesn't matter how much strength you have. Wait till I'm stronger. God's going to call us to do something that's beyond no matter how much strength you have. I know this. When God kind of tapped me on the shoulder through my voice of my wife and said, go plant a church, I felt like the angel of the Lord said, mighty pastor, mighty church planter. I'm like, what? I'm a youth pastor. I know how to tell vomit stories and holler and plan ski trips and stuff like that and do these things. I don't have any ability. 99.999% of this church, what happens, I don't know any of it. I don't know how to do it. I didn't know anybody. I have no resources. I didn't have any rich friends. I didn't know anyone. And he called me to just come out here. Oh, well, you were from here. From here, when I was from here, here wasn't here. Nobody lived here. There was an Air Force base and cows. And God said, do it. I had no, same thing. What is he calling you to be as a follower? And he's saying, hey, I'm going to be the one with you because it's going to be my strength anyways. And then look what he says. And you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. You're going to go through them like a warm knife through butter if you trust me. If you trust me. Sometimes the ridiculous things God is asking us to do when we have no resource to do it, God is setting us up for an easy victory. You don't believe me? We'll see by the end of this. So then after he does that, he goes, all right, maybe you love me. Maybe you know what you're doing. But then what happens is he goes, okay, well, then he thinks about it. He goes, all right, is this really God? So the next few verses, he just says, well, how do I know that's not my lack of caloric intake that's talking to me instead of the Lord? So he goes and he gets an offering and offers an offering to the angel Lord. And the angel Lord touches it. It totally just flames up and disappears. And then the angel Lord disappears. And so now he knows, oh, wow, that was God. So now it kind of freaks him out. And he says, when Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out, "O sovereign Lord, I'm doomed. I've seen the angel Lord face to face." "It's all right," the Lord replied. "Don't be afraid. You will not die." So he goes, "You're not going to die." And then he says, and Gideon built an altar to the Lord, and they're named it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. Think about that. In the middle of it, he still doesn't know how this is going to work. He still doesn't know what's going to happen. He just knows I am talking to God. He is expecting me to go do this. This is scary. He's still trying to hide food. The Midianite hordes are still out there. He still doesn't know how it's going to work. And yet he calls this place, worships God, and calls it the Lord is peace. Remember the first week I said when we want peace, what we really want is peace and quiet. We think we need to have quiet in our life to have peace. I need to have not the problems. I need to have the resource. I need this. Otherwise, I can't have peace. Right here, he has a moment of peace and names the place, the Lord is peace. He has peace in the least quiet time of his life. How about you? Can you experience peace when it's definitely not quiet? You need to trust the Lord. You need to know that he does love you, that he does know what he's doing. But then look what happens. So he's got that down, but now the next question comes to mind. It says, that night the Lord said to Gideon, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old. Pull down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole standing." This big pole they'd build, this like it's this pagan god they'd worship. So there's this altar built to this pagan god. And whose is it? It's his own dad's in the town. His own father. This is in his own family. And so what he tells him to do is tear it down, then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully, sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using as fuel the wood from the Asherah pole you cut down. So burn his idol and build an actual proper worship site to the Lord God, Yahweh, which they would have known what that looks like. Because like I said, they were worshiping these false gods, but you realize the Israelites still believed in Yahweh as their God. They never stopped believing in him. They just added this to the mix. And so he says, go burn down your dad's altar. Go attack their idols. And it's interesting. Before I'm going to have you go fight the enemy out there, I need you to fight the enemy in here. I need you to fight the enemy of the false, the idols, get your heart right before we can go fight those exterior battles. And so look what he does though. He agrees to do it. It says verse 27, so Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded. All right, he listened to God. But look at the next sentence. But he did it at night because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. So he did it, but he did it fearfully. And he said, I'm going to do this the least painful way I can know how to do it. I'm going to do it in a way that I hope nobody knows I did it. I'm going to do what you said, but I don't want to have to suffer for it at all. In other words, okay, you may really love me. You may know what you're doing. But the third fear, I just did 2, 4. I know math. Third fear, will God take care of me? And this is the difference. Take care of me. He knows he loves him. He's, okay, maybe he has a plan. But what he's afraid of now is that part is he going to take care of me in it? Because what did he promise him? You're not going to die. Okay, you'll live. There's a lot of different levels of living, isn't there? And he's probably concerned like, okay, he said I won't die, fine. But how bad is life going to be while I do this? And so he tries to find the easiest way to obey God. How many times do you do that? I do that. I sit there because what I'm really saying is, okay, I'm going to trust you, God, but I'm not sure you're really going to take care of me. Well, I think you'll take care of me, but I think, God, you and I have a different idea of what care of me looks like. Does that make sense? I think I take care of me better than I think God will take care of me. I'm afraid that this is going to hurt, and I don't want to hurt, so I will do it as easy as possible. All right, I'll serve, but only when I have time. And it can't be on this week or not here or whatever, because I have all this stuff I got to do. My kids are involved in 900 things that they probably 899 of them they don't need to be doing, but I want to compete with all the other parents, and I got to do the right thing, and that costs a lot of money, so I don't have money to give. And we get in all these stuff. All right, I'll do it. I'll give when I have a little bit of money. I'll give for my leftovers. I'll serve for my leftovers. I'll love for my leftovers. But you know what? And then you hear things like, men, love your wife like Christ loved the church. I don't know if I can do that, because if I choose to love her that way, that will be painful. You know why? How did the world treat Jesus? They crucified him. We crucified Jesus when he loved us. So it says, husbands, love your wife that way. So that means, has she crucified you yet? Some of you are like, well, I saw her with a hammer and nails earlier, and she was none too pleased. See, we get to that fear of, okay, I'm going to obey, but I have to do it under cover of dark. I'll only do it as easy as possible. You know what that really is? That's hitting up against this fear. That I'm afraid God's going to not take care of me as well as in the manner in which I've grown accustomed to be taken care of. It might cost me something. How many of you, that's your anxiety? Especially if you're a Christian and you hear messages all the time. Here's how to engage and honor God in your life. Here's what we're called to be as followers of Christ. And you're like, I can't do that. And then we get mad. We get angry. Because people don't like their idols to be burnt. They don't like it, because look what happens. So he does it. Early the next morning, verse 28, as the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and that the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. In their place, a new altar had been built, and there were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. The people said to each other, who did this? And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned that it was Gideon, the son of Joash. Bring out your son, the men of the town demanded of Joash. He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and for cutting down the Asherah pole. That's what he is afraid of. They're going to try to hurt me because they're not going to be happy that I destroyed their idols. I get it. I get it all the time. Because part of the calling to be a preacher, to be up front, is to declare the truth of God, to challenge us. In my words, I have to throat punch sometimes because I have to give you not what you want to hear, but what we need to hear. And sometimes we start worshiping our false idols. We come to church, we still believe in Jesus, but you know what? I'm not going to honor God with my time, my talent, my treasure, my money. I'm going to do my thing and sprinkle Jesus into it. And then I have to come here and cut those things down and burn them. And people don't like to have their idols burnt in front of them. So guess what? People get mad at me. Some of you right now are already upset with some of the things I just said. Because I said, hey, God says do this with your money, not this. Do this with your time, not do this. Love your spouse this way, not this way. Because it's not me saying it, it's God's word. I'm just the messenger. So I understand his fear. It's always a fear for a pastor to get up and tickle ears, as it says in the New Testament. Tell you what you want to say, want to hear. Yeah, you tell me what you want me to say. You see, we don't like our idols burnt. But you realize our idols being burnt is the only way we'll start seeing clearly. See, Gideon's a little concerned. He goes, I'm supposed to go defend Israel against the Midianite hordes, and now you've challenged me to go burn down my dad's idol, which made the whole town mad. But guess who it made see clearly? His dad. Apparently, when he burned it down, he saw the idol, to the worship thing built back to the Lord, and he saw there was his own son that had the courage to do it. It gave him clarity. It made him say, hey, he had that moment that sometimes when your idols get burnt, you see that you don't need them anymore. Some of the struggle you might have where life feels so hard right now is God might be burning down your idols. And the problem is you identify so clearly with your idol that you think he's trying to burn you down. He's not. He's trying to clear you away from that dependence on that need for that, and to see clearly you can live without that. You can't live without him. That's the point. And so his dad speaks up when they want to kill him, and he says in verse 31, but Joash shouted to the mob and confronted him, why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal is truly a god, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar. And from then on, they gave him a new name called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal defend himself. He turned the whole crowd because his dad turned to defend. He's like, you know what? Now that I think about it, look at this. God has always been there for us. What has Baal done? It's only distracted us. And look what's happening. We don't need him. He can't even defend himself. Forget it. And guess what? The whole crowd turns. And you know what happened in this moment? He might not be a mighty hero yet, but guess what Gideon just became? A leader. He just stepped into leadership. He's not hiding in the wine press now. He's not fighting the Midianite hordes, but at least he's standing up, and he got his thing right, his heart right with God, and he turned the hearts of the people. That's what God was always intending to do. A lot of the anxiety we have in our life is God is trying to turn our hearts back to him. He's not trying to destroy you. He's trying to destroy the idols and the fears and the things around you that don't really satisfy and only come with more anxiety. So that happens. So now he's like, okay, God does really love me. God knows what he's doing. God will take care of me. And then it seems like it starts to turn and get a lot better. He goes, but then look what happens. Soon afterwards, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. At the same time that's happening, it says the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms. He's become a leader now. And the men of the clan of Abiezar came to him. His own clan now is following him. And then he sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, summoning their warriors. And all of them responded. He's become a leader. He's raising an army. They're showing up. But at the same time, he finds out that, it's not just the Midianites. The Amalekites and all these other nations from the east, they've massed this giant alliance, and they've already crossed the Jordan River. They're coming after us right now. And in that moment, he got that boldness, he got that power, but right at that moment, he gets a little bit concerned. And it happens all the time with us. You come in here, you get motivated by a sermon, or you're in your own quiet time, or something happens, and you're like, all right, I can do this thing. I know I'm weak. I'm going to go with the strength I have and trust God. I'm going to move forward. And it starts to work. I got an army. I'm starting to get somewhere. And then you find out the army against you is even bigger than the one you thought it was in the first place. You leave here all pumped up and your kid throws up in the car. Your wife starts fighting with you. The Cardinals don't win. The Seahawks do. All kinds of tragedy. Just things happen. And you're like, I didn't think it would be this hard. And you start to second guess. And that's when the fourth fear hits. Okay, maybe God does love me. Maybe he does know what he's doing. Maybe he can take care of me. But can I fully trust him? It comes to this, now can I fully trust him? I trust him with those other things, but now this is getting big. This is getting really scary now. And can I trust him all the way? Because you realize there is a huge difference with trusting God with most things versus trusting God with everything. And here comes a throat punch. If you only trust God with most things, you really don't trust God with anything. If you only trust God with most things, I'm sorry to tell you, you really don't trust him with anything. You just don't, because you're the one that's still in control. And so he starts to have some second thoughts. And so he does something crazy here, which is not recommended in the Bible to do with God, by the way. It says Then Gideon said to God in verse 36, if you're truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me this way. I'll put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I'll know that you're going to help me rescue Israel as you promised. And that's just what happened. When Gideon got up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out a whole bowl full of water. So he tested God, and God was patient with him, said, okay, and he did it. Well, then the next day, Gideon said to God, please don't be angry with me. You ever have anybody say that to you? I got to tell you something, but you got to promise me you're not going to get mad. What does that mean? What's coming out of their mouth next? Something that's going to make you mad. And so it says, please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground is wet. So that night, God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. Look, he did it again. He didn't say, no, that's it. I wipe you out, Gideon. He's like, he smote, like, wouldn't you think it would say he smoted, smited, whatever, destroyed him, and then found someone else to do it? Wouldn't he do that? This is the Old Testament God. Isn't he angry God? Didn't God get nice in the New Testament? God's been the same. You know what that proves? It doesn't prove that, we should go out and do the fleece test. We shouldn't constantly test God. The point was, despite the fact that he was doubting God, God chose to be patient with him. God is patient with us. He's patient with you. But don't assume that patience is agreement. Just because he's patient with you right now doesn't mean he agrees with what you're doing right now. He's patient because he loves you. And he's patient because he wants you to become the mighty hero that he's called you to be. But you have to trust him. And I think that God gave him this moment because he knew what he was going to do next. He was preparing Gideon's heart for what happened next. And as we go into chapter 7, there's this principle that what he was preparing him for, to try to encourage him for, is because this is when it gets really scary when you choose to trust God. One of our biggest fears, all this trust, all this stuff boiled down to this, is oftentimes, here you can write this down, God may reduce my resource, so I must put my faith in the source. God will do this oftentimes. God may reduce my resource, so I must put my faith in the source. So a lot of times, right when you think you're getting it together, you're starting to, like, he gathers, he has this army starting to build, maybe you can have some confidence. This happens a lot. You start to trust God, you start to make those decisions, you start to live life the way he's called you to live, and it seems to be getting better, and then all of a sudden, bam, it seems like you go backwards. It seems like, oh man, I trusted you, now I don't have a job, or now I'm just so busy, or now this stress at work. It seems to get worse. This is those moments when God is about to hand you an actual, easier victory if you trust him. Because look what happens. It says in chapter 7, so Jerubbaal, which is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. You were too good of a leader. Your army's too big. But here's why. If I let you all fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. How many times will you refuse to trust God when you don't have enough resource? Because you want to wait till you have enough resource. And then when you get enough resource, it's you that did it. So where was God's strength proven? Where was God glorified in that? He says, therefore, tell all the people, whoever is timid or afraid, leave this mountain and go home. We know there's 32,000 men in his army. It's a pretty big army. So God says, just tell the ones who are scared, then go home. That probably didn't intimidate. Okay, I just have to tell the ones that are scared. How many will I lose? Hey, if you're scared, go home. 22,000 left, 2/3. He's like, wow, I didn't know there was that many cowards. And they all left. And he's like, okay, at least I got 10,000. God comes back and says, still too big. Still too many men. This army they're facing was more than 32,000, by the way. They were still outnumbered going into this battle. And so he says, still too big. So here's what he says to do. In verse 5, he said, go take their warriors down to the spring, and I'm going to test them. Verse 5, when Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, divide the men into two groups. In one group, put all those who cup water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues. In the other group, put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. So he takes them to this place called, what's called Gideon Springs now. And we know where it is. I've actually been there. I got a picture of where the spring comes from. They have a fence in front of it. That wasn't there then. But it's this like little cave-like thing goes out of this little mountain hill, and the water just bubbles up out of the ground. And then it kind of spreads out like a little stream, and it goes. And so he took them down here. This is where it happened. And he said, you got to divide them into two groups. One group is those who cup the water and lick it up like a dog. What that looks like is I got a picture of my son actually doing that at Gideon Springs. There he is. That's the first group. The second group is guys that just walk down, kneel over, and stick their head in the water and go. I don't get this, but which group do you think would be the biggest group? Didn't you think it'd be that? Only 300 did that. 9,700 stuck their head in the water. That's probably why they weren't afraid and didn't leave. They weren't smart enough to be afraid. There was only 300 that were smart and brave. But so it's 9,700 stick their head in the water and slurp it up like it's a giant straw. And the 300 are left. And you guess what God says? And guess, I bet at this point Gideon knew what was happening. Oh, I guarantee I know which group he's going to say to keep. And then God goes, there it is, these 300 men. This is the original story of the 300. Only this group won. This group wins. From 32,000 to 300 men, he says, this is the army that's going to do it. And then it says in verse 9, that night the Lord said, get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I've given you victory over them. So he goes, you can go fight now. But he said, but if you're afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant, Purah. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you'll be greatly encouraged, then you'll be eager to attack. So he's like, hey, you can go now, but if you're afraid, go listen to what they're saying. I want to encourage you. You know, there's a whole sermon. I don't have enough time for this, but think about this. How many times could we have a moment that God can encourage us when we're in one of these tough moments, but we don't spend time talking to God? We just try to handle, even in obeying God. How many times do we try to obey God in tough moments and we forget to talk to God? You're missing out on encouraging moments. He says, just go listen. I want to encourage your heart before we do this thing. And so then he goes down. Gideon took Purah, went down to the edge of the enemy camp. Verse 12, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains on the sands of the seashore, too many to count. That's where we know they had a bigger army than even the 32,000. You'd think that Gideon would say, this is supposed to encourage me? It says, but then Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, I had this dream. And in my dream, a loaf of barley bread, which represents Israel, barley, came tumbling down into the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat. His companion answered, your dream can mean only one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all of its allies. So they knew who Gideon was. They heard his name. They knew his God, and they were terrified. He says, wow, this massive army is afraid. So he runs back. He goes back. And in verse 15, he says, when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship before God. Always a good thing to do. He then returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes. He says, get up, we're going to attack. 300 against all of them. We're going to go do it. And then he organized. You can go read their story, but he organized. They break into 3 groups of 100. They take those ram's horns. And if you ever heard a ram's horn, it's pretty intimidating sound. And they take all these ram's horns, they take all these jars, and they attack from 3 sides, smashing it and blowing the ram's horn. So they're all waking up in the middle of the night. They're already scared. They're already afraid. And they hear from 3 different sides, like over and over, and then smashing of things. And they freak out like, we're surrounded. We're getting attacked. And they start fighting each other, and they basically wipe each other out. And Gideon's men hardly have to fight. Totally rout them, destroy them completely. See what I said? God reduced their resource so they would trust these source, and they got an easier victory than if they had fought with the 32,000. If they went head on, 32,000 against God only hell knows, how many Israelites would have died? How much pain and suffering would have been there? And then they still would have had their own pride thinking they did it themselves. They would not have been proven in their own hearts. They needed it for them. They didn't have to prove their faith to God. God needed to show them, you can trust me. If they had won with 32,000, more pain, more suffering, still no faith in God. What about you? What if you decided to gather your army before you trust God? You end up with more carnage and less trust in the end. What would happen if in your weak moments, in your time when you have nothing, when you time you feel reduced, in the time when it feels like all these fears, I'm going all in with Jesus. I'm going to trust him completely. Or will you stand behind your fears? Just like that song we just sang. The last song we sang was, what are you going to do? Stand behind your fear or stand in the love of Jesus? Because here's what happens. When we start to stand behind our fears, we start to build an altar, one of those high places, one of those shrines, and this becomes our own little idol. Our own fears can become our idols. And we hide behind these fears and we start building this wall. And it starts with, does God really love me? Because life is hard. And now I'm not sure if he loves me. And we get separated a little bit. And then we hear what God wants us to do. It's like, does God know what he's doing? How could he expect me to trust him in this moment? Doesn't he know what's going on? Doesn't he know who I am? Doesn't he care? Doesn't he know I'm afraid? Doesn't he know my suffering? Doesn't he know my position? Doesn't he know how hard it is? How on earth can he expect me to do that? We get another question. And then we start to go, okay, even if I trust, will God take care of me? Is he going to take care of me if I trust him? How painful is this going to be? Because ultimately, I don't know if I can trust God. And now I'm stuck back here. Hi. Hello. And this really all starts with that lie that you believe in your heart, if God's so great, God would never give me more than I can handle. And now I'm back here, hiding, standing behind these fears, isolated, in the dark, alone, starting to feel like God doesn't care at all, and I don't get it, and it's unrealistic what he's asking of me, and I am stuck. I'm stuck in this place in my life, and I don't know what to do to get out of it. I feel trapped. When what God asks us to do, what we should do is not stand behind the fears, but stand in his love. Stand in his love. What would it be like if you chose not to stand behind the fear, but stand in the love? What does that even look like? The song sings it best. It quotes scripture. Standing in his love is where you have the resurrection power of Jesus. That's what the words say. It says that when we stand in his love, when I have a relationship with Jesus, when I choose to trust him, when I choose to not stay behind the fears, but stand in that love, it means I know that Jesus died for me, even though I run from him. That he is patient with me. He loves me. He cares for me. I can trust him with everything because he died on the cross for me and then had the power to not even stay dead. He came back to life. Resurrection power. That word for power of God in the New Testament is the word dunamis. It's where we get the word dynamite from. You know what dynamite does? It changes the landscape and clears the way. That's what dynamite does. That's why it calls this power dynamite, because the power of God is this power that when it explodes on the scene, it changes everything. It changes the landscape. It clears the way. And that's what Jesus did when he died. But guess what? The New Testament goes on to say that when we stand in a relationship with Jesus, that we have the absolute same power in our lives. The power that resurrected Christ is now in you. We have that dynamite power of God. We just got to use it. We got to choose to stand in it. You got to choose to present it. Or what are you going to do? Are you going to stand in the love? Or are you going to choose to stay behind the fears? Are you going to choose to wallow in the misery, to get more and more stressed and feel sorry for yourself? Or will I stand in the light? Or am I going to go back here, standing in the dark, standing in the fear, hiding here, saying, I can't. Or will I stand in the light and unleash the dynamite power of God? My fear was fighting back. And see what happens? This is what it does. The fears aren't gone. They're still scattered around, but they don't stand a chance anymore. They can't hold you back anymore. They can't stop you. Might have stopped them, but it won't stop you. They're here, but the way is cleared. You can see them, but you can walk past them. You can live through them. You can do it if you don't stand behind the fear. You have to stand in the love You have to stand in the power, and you have to make that choice. It's your decision. Do you want to stand in his love? Well, then stand up with me, and let's sing those words to God as our closing prayer. Let's stand in his love. Amen.
My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Come on, we sing that again. My fear doesn't stand a chance. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. 'Cause there's power that can break off every chain. And there's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. And there's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, I'm standing in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I'm standing in your Amen, church.